Welcome back, baseball fans, to 1971-74 Carryover League, launching in 2023 in the summer. And we've got our fifth and final look at the 2,560 cards available, at least printed by Strat-O-Matic or myself from the years 1971 and 1974, not all draft eligible. But this is the last group of teams to look at alphabetically, looking to see who they might select in the first round and where their draft might go after that. We've done the 24 of 32 teams, and this will be the final installment of this part of the process, and then we'll move on to more analysis in a different way coming up next time. But we want to pick up with the Pittsburgh Pirates, 1971 and 1974. This is a big and a very intriguing team that has not come away with much success in the last 2 years. And now, for the first time, the clock is ticking on that 1971 season where they won the World Series. They had the best record in baseball in 1972 in an overall down year, records-wise in baseball, but you could look that up. You have to consider first, and the way we do this is we're going to look at some of the current players and see if they get better moving forward. And this is a look at the 12 that they start with. Mazeroski, Kelly, Bless, Keeson, Stargell, Stennett, Hebner, Moose, Justy, Hernandez, Zisk, and Rooker. So their current cards they have are indicated here, of course, 71, and then 72, and then 73. So those areas here are blank because that's the year they're in. And the question is, do you highlight an area where the player could get better in one of the other years? And the answer for the Pirates, anyway, is that no. They have maximum potential with the current card they have, which is really good news, by the way. Sometimes, like we've seen other teams highlighting, look at Philadelphia. They've highlighted 3 of their players who were better in other years. And the reality is they probably won't upgrade to those cards, so you're losing a little bit of optimal value of in a stats-based league like this. So maybe it's a good thing for the Pirates. They don't have to internally improve. Let's go then look at the keepers of the Pirates, and we'll also take a look at the full rookie class of 74 and a partial rookie class of 73. The Pirates, it's Roberto Clemente, Al Oliver, Bob Robertson, Manny Sanguillen. Looking for a first-round pick before we even go to the rookies, I think Mr. Clemente is probably that. Particularly his 71 season. He hit 341 with an 871 OPS, and being a Hall of Famer, that definitely grants you first-round pick potential. Of course, Al Oliver we really like as well. We need him to play center field now for this team. And while we are looking at defense in this column, knowing it's important to have him in center when he's not really a center fielder, folks, but he needed to play there because their corners were locked up and the first base was locked up. So Al's a 2 first baseman in 1973 in a year he hits 292. And he's a 3 center fielder in a year he has over 300. So that'll be an interesting dilemma for the Pirates. Do you go with Al's rangy defense in center or the stick when it comes draft time? Robertson's okay. Doesn't have to be a first-round pick. Manny Sanguillen has still 1 300 year left in him in 71, but it pales to Clemente's. We will take a peek at the rookies anyway, because last year we got 73 Zisk into the league, and that was a wonderful card. This year's remaining 73 players who weren't drafted last year include Jackie Hernandez, John Lamb, and of course the Cobra, Dave Parker, who hit 288 in a partial season. But frankly, they are so backed up in the outfield, they don't have any room for Parker yet. And you see, in this particular example, in a carryover league, Roberto Clemente, we know about his tragic passing at the end of the 72, New Year's Eve, but I can keep him playing on the Pirates through the 72 to 75 season. So Clemente will continue to have value for the Pirates moving forward. So that's incredibly advantageous for the Pirates. And Parker might just have to wait a little longer before he breaks in. In the 74, the young rookies, the current rookies we haven't seen yet. Here they are. It's, again, Dave Parker. Now he's up to 282 with similar numbers, really. Lee Richard, Frank Tavares, Jim Bibby, Tom Carroll, Alan Foster. Some of those are nice players. We know Tavares will play short for this team. Bibby will be a nice pitcher. But for the moment, it's Roberto Clemente in the first round, probably Manny Sengia in the second round. That concludes the Pirates. All right, next up is the Portland expansion team. Always eager to improve are these teams. The expansion teams mostly have a ragtag unit of leftovers from other major league teams. So oftentimes they have players who get better in another year. It happens for them with one interesting player, and that's catcher Bob Montgomery. Let's take a look at him first before we look at the rest of the keepers and rookies. So Bob Montgomery, we have him in the league with a pretty nice little card of 72. He hits 286. He's got a 377 slugging and a 685 OPS, and it's a nice little catching card. Nice batting average. But in 73, this is one of those special years he had with the Red Sox during the decade. It seemed like once every 3 years or so he hit over 300 in backing up Carlton Fisk in Boston. Anyway, in 73, yeah, it is a short sample, 137 plate appearances, but it's 320. 563 OPS, 563 slugging, 915 OPS. That is a substantially better productive card for Montgomery. And that could be their first round pick, making him, his stats, compete in the Johnny Bench era for as far as offense goes on a short sample. And before you start saying, well, that's unfair that Portland gets to use a guy like that, keep in mind that there's 20 guys on these teams, and Portland needs a lot more help than Bob Montgomery for them to overtake your traditional major league powerhouses. So if it's not Montgomery, who could it be? Bernie Carbo. They acquired him from the Reds, and in his 4 years, only one of them really stands out. That is 73 with an 819 OPS. He's a candidate. You have Tony Gonzalez, who's only 1 year left. It's not that great. They have Jim Perry, who actually, as he gets older, and do we have age in here? Yes, he's 30. Yeah, he's 38 years old in 1974. And he pitches to a 296 ERA, 121 whip for the Indians, teaming up with his brother Gaylord Perry. 4-year contract, those stats and the length of the contract and the fact that Perry was a all-star 20-game winner, former 20-game winner, that could be a first-round pick. So Montgomery, the 1-year Carbo, Perry, Rich Reese is just ordinary. Just a good glove at first base, not much stick. And then we have to take a peek at the rookies. And, of course, expansion teams, rookie players aren't nearly as good as the traditional major league teams because, well, the expansion teams get them from the traditional major league teams, and they only let them go, and they don't need them. So, in this case, in the 73 set, Portland has Mike Anderson, John Milner, Bobby Mitchell, Jerry Terrell, George Theodore, Danny Thompson, Charlie Huff, Ernie McCanley. Of the batters, Anderson and Milner have 760, 70 OPS. Two pitchers aren't particularly good. None of that screams first round material. And again, when I say first round material, it means best player available, meaning that you can't hide a guy and then protect him and stash him on your roster, and then announce you're going to, like Bob Montgomery, for example. You can't wait to the 8th round of the draft and say, oh, I'm going to upgrade him to a 320 hitter. You know, it's supposed to be ranked from first round pick to 8th round pick as BPA. 74, Portland. They have Mike Anderson, Pat Bork, Jim, and Larry Cox. No relation, I don't think. Gray Gross, Bobby Mitchell, Dave Hamilton, Milt Wilcox. One of these players is interesting, and that is Gray Gross. A nice hitter. We know he's a very good National League pinch hitter during this era with the Phillies and Cubs. And the Astros. In a full season, 676 plate appearances. That's got to be a career high for Craig Gross. He's 314, 393, 377, 770. Doesn't hit for power. Didn't hit a homer. Is that correct? You might have 0 home runs. Oh, my goodness. 21 doubles, 8 triples. Interesting. But that's a decent card. After looking at the lack of power, I don't think it's first-round material. So, after all that, I think Bob Montgomery is the splash player you announce first, because no one in the Portland system has an OPS better than Montgomery's 915. Not even close, as a matter of fact. Yeah, Bernie Carbo is 819, almost 100 points lower. All right, so next up, we go back to the Padres, a team that would struggle. Let's see if there's a current Padre who gets significantly better. The answer is no. There's 2 ways to look at that. One way is that they've maxed their potential. The other way is that it doesn't really matter. So you hope it's that they max their potential. So their keepers are Ollie Brown, Chris Cannizzaro, Cito Gaston, Ed Spezio. Ollie Brown is actually pretty consistent. 270-ish hitter, 710, 40-ish OPS. Good throwing arm. Is his best defensive attribute. -4, -4, and -3 in 3 years. That doesn't sound. That sounds like a second or third round pick right there. Chris Cannizzaro has some nice on base percentage. Doesn't hit 250 at any point. Gaston had a fantastic 1970. Then he came crashing to earth in 71 with a 228 average. But the good news is Gaston does recover a little bit. Not necessarily in the timeline, however. He hits 269 in the following year and 250. And then a little bit later on, he has a nice year, I think, with the Atlanta Braves. So his career's not over. It's just kind of in a lull right here. Ed Spezio, the third baseman, his batting average is also below 250. The good news, or the best news, is that it's probably going to be a rookie in the first round and maybe another one in the second round, because this Padre team is very deep in young players. And why is that? Opportunity. They brought them up and they delivered, where other teams would wait on young players. Look at all these 22. Look at the ages here. 22, 24, 22, 24. Rich Morales is 29. He's already been in the league and been kicked out. Dave Winfield's 21. 24, 23. All very young Padre, AAA players getting their shot in the major leagues in 73. Of these, Johnny Grubb, 311, 818 OPS would be the best. Winfield is fine, but his defense is not there yet, so you'd wait till the next year or the year after. And the pitchers, they got some nice ones. Mike Caldwell and Bill Grief. Ignore the one-loss record, 5-14, 10-17. That's because they're Padres. But look at the ERAs, 321, a 122 whip for Bill Grief. 74, even more Padres. Some of the same names, plus some more names. So, in a carryover league like I have, it's an opportunity for the Padres to outperform what they did in Major League Baseball. Johnny Grubb, again, his numbers dip a little bit. Winfield, his 74 numbers aren't the greatest either, though he does have a 438 slugging because he had 20 homers. He's still a 4 with a -2 arm and also an E15. Something about that concerns me. I mean, Dave Winfield's one of the best defensive outfielders we've seen, and to bring him into the league with such poor defense doesn't seem right. But plus with Johnny Grubb, I think gets to the league sooner, as he's 25 years old. Winfield's only 22. Fred Kendall had a nice year in there. Ed Sprague actually has a nice year pitching. And we talked about Mike Caldwell in the previous year. Dave Freislaven can pitch on 3 days rest. So there's a whole bunch of different young Padres that they can take in the first and second round. And it seems like Johnny Grubb would be a strong candidate to be their first round pick. All right. We'll go to Seattle, another fictional team like Portland, even though we know they do exist. but that wasn't until 1977. So the retro Mariners, Steve Klein gets a little bit better in 72 from 71, but both years are great. Good to know they have a fallback option if they can't find anybody else in 72 to pick. They can always go and improve Steve Klein. Norm Miller, Skip Pitlock, Diego Segui, Luke Walker. Of these guys, Segui has the most improved years here. He has 3 years of an ERA right around 3 as a starter and a reliever. 1 year he's a full-time starter in 71, and then he's a full-time reliever in the next 2 years. He's successful either way. Doesn't scream first-round pick, though. But that's a very talented pitcher for those 3 years. Luke Walker is another one, similar, just statistically probably not as good as Segui. So this is a team really looking for somebody else out there that could be their first-round pick. So looking at the 73 rookie class for Seattle, and you have Adrian Garrett, Winston Lennis, Bill North, that's the one, Tom Paciorek, Mike Phillips, Leroy Stanton, Adrian Devine, Alan Foster. So they go out to other organizations and find players. I think Leroy Stanton was a California Angel. And, of course, Bill North played for the Oakland A's. Bill North would be the selection here because it does two things. He's an excellent player for them, but it also hurts the biggest and dangerous team in your division, the Oakland A's, who have not really had good center field production the last 2 years. They had Jose Tartabull. They have Angel Mangual. They really want Bill North. And if the Mariners take him, it means that the A's will have to take Claudell Washington and put him in center field without much defense. So Bill North, his stats, 285, 725 OPS, 53 stolen bases, 2-2 E10 in center field. He could very well be the best player on the team. The disadvantage, or it's not really a disadvantage, the one problem or potential problem is they already have a very nice center fielder, and that is Dave May. But who is, oddly enough, he's got the exact same defense, so 2-2 E10. So you can move Dave May into right field and let Bill North play center field. That's the easiest solution to that, so you have both players on the team. We have one more group of rookies to look at, and that would be the 74 Seattle rookies. Interestingly, they won't have Bill North in this class. Oakland has him. So 1 year Oakland protected North, another year they didn't. So it becomes a race to see which team selects him first. It's first come, first serve. And Oakland was in the World Series, so Seattle has their chance, and they need to capitalize. If they don't take Bill North with their first-round pick, they very well, the Oakland A's might, and that would shut Seattle out of a good player. In the 74 class, Seattle has Bruce Bach-T. When we do these redrafts of fictional teams who were actually traditional teams later on, like Seattle, we sometimes match up future players. And we know Bruce Bach-T is one of the first successful Seattle players. The All-Star game was in Seattle in 1979, and Bruce Bach-T got to play in that game at first base, and he was probably one of the first best players for Seattle. So they have his 74 card where he hits 270 with a 709 OPS. They could get him into the league as an infielder and an outfielder, but probably not in the first round. All right, next up, we're getting into the bottom part of the alphabet. We got 4 more to do. The Giants, a very intriguing team. A team that had a wonderful heyday that continued from 69 into 70 and then lingered into 71. But then they got old and they didn't bring the rookies up, or they didn't utilize the rookies in the right way. And they did not have any prosperity. It just fell downhill in the 1970s and early 80s for the Giants. They let the careers of Gary Matthews get away, let the career of Gary Maddox get away, Ken Henderson got away, and they didn't really have the replacements. Mike Caldwell, I think, got away. Ron Bryant, some other Jim Barr. and they held on to, older players like McCovey and Marichal and so forth. Let's take a look here at your Giants, and oh my goodness. So we talk about mismanagement and managing. They have a lot of decisions here. Don Carruthers becomes an outstanding reliever in 74. Fran Healy, as a catcher, has probably his best year in 73. Jim Barr would become an ace in the year of 74. Right now, he's a number 4 starter. And Ed Goodson becomes a steady, everyday third baseman in 1973. All 4 of those players are presently on their roster with inferior cards. Sounds like because of the quantity, they should try at least one of these guys if they don't find anybody significant. However, they're loaded with talent here to draft in the first round. We have Dick Dietz, a catcher with power and the ability to draw a walk. He has on-base percentages of 387 and 71, and this is not a misprint, a 474 on-base percentage in 1973. Unbelievable. 905 OPS with that card. That's first-round pick material. He's in that same, I mentioned Bob Montgomery, Johnny Bench. Yeah, Dick Dietz's one-year numbers are in that same stratosphere. McCovey, he has a fantastic 73 with a 966 OPS, and even in 74, it's still good. At age 36, he's still got a 922 OPS, hitting 29 and 22 homers accordingly there. Sam McDowell, he has probably 1, maybe 2 good years in this sample. His 73 is very nice, and his 71 is pretty nice. Walks a lot of guys, gives up a lot of home runs. Not as many in 73. And then they have an older closer, Don McMahon, very older pitcher, pitching into his 40s. But in 1973, he's got a 1.48 ERA. But it's in a short number of innings with a 0.92 whip. So it's just calibrating who you want to pick in the first and the second and the third round. They've probably got about, including those carry-on guys, they've probably got about 3 first-round pick players that they won't lose out on, aforementioned. However, we have to go look at the rookies, and they got to make sure they don't slide any of these guys. And the best rookie from last year who did not get picked is 1973 Gary Maddox, who, if they don't take him in the first 4 rounds, meaning that in the first 4 rounds, you take a player from the years of 71 to 74. If Maddox is not one of those guys, then they don't have the rights to protect him anymore, and he gets mixed into the regular pool of players available. He would immediately become the best player in 1973 that is available to be signed, along with the guys who are on waivers. So the numbers for Maddox, he's 319. This is in 622 plate appearances. This is not like a short sample guy. Full season with the Giants, 319, 350, 460, 810, and 24 stolen bases. He's not that Gold Glove winning center fielder he becomes. He's only 23 years old. But this card should have been in the league last year, and it wasn't. Gary Maddox is going to be playing in the carryover league this summer, either with the Giants or with somebody else. And if it's not in the 1973, it'll be with the 74 card, which we'll take a peek at shortly. Besides him, Steve Olivares has got a decent card. Gary Thomason is a decent card. And Randy Moffett is a decent reliever. Those guys could be slid into later rounds, though, with all the Giant talent that they have. But like I said, they got to manage it properly, or they're going to lose a lot of this talent. And the 74 rookies here, and there's a ton of them. Mick Kelleher, Gary Maddox again, Bruce Miller, Olivares again, Dave Rader again, Ken Rudolph, Gary Thomason, Mike Caldwell, John D'Acquisto, Ed Haliki, Elias Sosa, and Charlie Williams. Well, Maddox is hitting 284, 720, but he's a 2 in center field now. His batting average went down a bit. Bruce Miller, it's 278. Dave Radar is a left-handed hitting catcher who hit 291. You got Mike Caldwell with a 2.95 ERA. John D'Acquisto as a starter can pitch on 3 days rest. And Charlie Williams is a good reliever with a 2.78 ERA. I mean, the Giants just got to nail this draft. You can get 8. You should be able to get 8 really good players. And that would help the Giants. But make sure you don't lose out and take the wrong years. Or make sure you study which of those 8 you're going to have. All right. Next up, St. Louis Cardinals. Always in a tough timeline with the Reds and Pirates in your division. Lou Brock technically gets better in 74, but it's through the stolen bases, of course. Ted Simmons in 73 with more power. Those are the 2 Cardinals who get a little bit better. I kind of disputed Lou Brock getting better in 74 because his on base percentage goes down and the stolen bases go up. I don't know how much salt you put into stolen bases. That's a stat, a pile up stat that doesn't really help the rest of his team that much. His on base percentage with a 71 card is about getting on base and letting Joe Torre knock you in, as Joe Torre led the league in RBI. So I prefer the 71 Brock that's currently in the league. All right, so the keepers are Ted Sizemore, Reggie Smith, Bill Sadakis, Chuck Taylor. Nice players here. Let's start with Reggie Smith, probably the most famous guy. He's got some Red Sox cards that you can take. Red Sox traded him to the Cardinals in the offseason. They didn't mind giving those stats away. Oddly enough, he doesn't hit 300 with the Red Sox anymore, but he has back-to-back 300 years with St. Louis. And his OPS goes over 900 with St. Louis, and it was 840 with Boston. So maybe you do take the St. Louis Cardinal version of Reggie Smith for the St. Louis Cardinals. Ted Sizemore is a very consistent player, not much in the power or extra base department. 264, 264, 282, 250, and not much speed, and not a flashy player, not a first-round pick, but a nice player to be on your team. Very steady. Steady players like this, their value is that you're flexible enough to take any other 4 years and not really worry too much of which 4-year year you have. So you always are isolating guys who have only one good year, so you nail that 1 year. And then you just get around to Ted Sizemore in the year that's left over. Bill Sadakis is one of those 1 year guys. And boy, is it a year. It is the 1973 year of Bill Sadakis. His numbers are good to very good, but it doesn't reflect what the card looks like. It's 255, 320, 494, 814. But the card shows a guy who crushes home runs versus left-handed pitching. Probably has the most home runs on his card versus lefties in the entire National League, which would be a pretty cool thing for the Cardinals to have advantage, to help them against the Pirates and Reds, particularly when Don Gullett from the Reds and Jim Rooker from the Pirates roll into town. You throw Bill Sadakis out there in a cleanoff spot, get a 3-run homer, and you snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. It's just like that. Chuck Taylor becomes a really nice closer in one of the years. 73, his card's not available. 74 is, though, with a 2.17 ERA and a 1.17 whip. So 74, Chuck Taylor. Reggie Smith, Sadakis, really any of those guys can be a first-round pick. They're rookies left over from 73. There's some nice ones. Mike Adams, Gonzalo Marquez, Bate McBride, Ken Reitz, Rich Folkers, Orlando Pena. Wow. So McBride hits 300, but it's only in 71 at-bats, and he doesn't have defense, but the batting average is there. And the pitchers, Orlando Pena, is a quality closer setup guy. 2.18 ERA and a 1.19 whip. So a very good right-handed reliever, and Bate McBride are available from 73. And in 74, we'll probably see Bate McBride again, if I had to guess. A lot of them. Jack Heidemann, Mark Hill, Marv Lane, Bate McBride, Ken Reitz, Rich Folkers, Bob Forsch making his debut, Mike Garman, and Lynn McLaughlin making his debut for
the Cardinals. He started with the Red Sox. By the way, Babe McBride is only 25 years old here. So Bake now is getting 625 plate appearances, and he's hitting 309. So this would be the Babe McBride you would take if you were going to do that. That could be a first-round pick. He's got a lot of success coming up. He would hit 330. You could even hold on to him a little longer before he ends up on the Phillies. As far as the pitchers go, Bob Forsch gets 19 starts, half a season, but he's got a good 2.97 ERA. And Mike Garman's a good relief pitcher with a 2.64 ERA. And Lynn McLaughlin, though, I missed Lynn McLaughlin because, folks, he's the best starter. He can pitch on 3 days rest for the Cardinals in 74, and it might be his best career year. A 2.69 ERA and 1.27 WHIP. So the Cardinals, they're in good hands. They have plenty of nice options. They're going to be an exciting team. They didn't have Reggie Smith last year, and that could mean a lot. Though they can add Lynn McLaughlin to Bob Gibson, still has a stellar card, and they could add Babe McBride. They could have a lot of good stuff going on and really put a scare into the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who dominate this division. All right, 2 more teams. The letter T for Texas. The Texas Rangers / Washington Senators. I think 3 years ago, they had a really wild card playoff run. Then reality set in the last couple of years through lack of talent. But suddenly, the kids who have been in the minor leagues forever finally bloomed. They got Jeff Burrows into the league. They got Toby Harrah into the league. And they have Steve Foucault and Mike Hargrove and Lenny Randall waiting in the wings. As far as internal improvement, well, look at it all. So Frank Lindsay is a nice 72, as does Denny Riddleberger. Paul Lindblad is an excellent 74, which would have been for the Oakland A's. We mentioned Bill North earlier. Texas could hold on to Paul Lindblad. Keep them away, keep these guys away from the Oakland A's, and it hurts their dynasty chances. It's the only shot these teams have, really. Dave Nelson becomes a steady second baseman in 73. And would you believe Jeff Burrows, this is interesting, he's the MVP in 74, though his numbers are only a little bit better than they were in 73 when he was just a young player with his first full season. So there's a lot to unpack there for Texas. Of all that, let's just take a peek at Toby Harrah for a moment. I'm not Toby Harrah, Jeff Burrows for a moment. I want to show you these numbers. So his 73 card, he had 30 homers, 279, 842 OPS. A year later, he wins the Most Valuable Player Award. He's hitting 301, but he's only hitting 25 homers, and his OPS is 901. So, overall, on-base percentage, slugging, OPS, they're better, but he's already he's pretty close to his ceiling already at age 22. So, do you need to jump him up to the MVP card? Probably not. It pales to the comparison we did of Steve Garvey, who went from a 227 hitter to a Most Valuable Player. That's when you do the improvement, when it's a significant jump. Here, it's just a very minor jump. And like I said, their farm system seems to be blooming anyway. So they might not have room in the draft to improve Burrows. They're going to keep older players while considering younger ones. The older guys, Bernie Allen, Billy Canigliaro, Frank Howard, Bob Johnson. Name recognition, Frank Howard's the guy, but he may have one more first-round year. Yep, he's got a 71 season, 26 homers, 279, 840 OPS. That could be the first-round pick, though I think there are better guys in the rookie list. And then Bob Johnson doesn't pitch on 3 days rest anymore. He has a good 1972 with a 296 ERA. So I think we need to look at these rookies. The Ranger farm system that's finally starting to produce. So in 73, we still have Burrows and Harrah jumped off of that 73 list last year. But they still have remaining Larry Bittner, Tom Grieve, Jim Mason, Bill Stein, Jim Bibby, David Clyde, Steve Dunning, and Steve Foucault. From that list, Tom Grieve hits 309 with 877 OPS. His fielding's not there. But that's one of Tom Grieve's best years. And the pitchers, not so much there. Nothing really special. Jim Bibby's got a 3.24 ERA. But in 74, we're going to see some new names of young guns in the Ranger system. And that would be, so you have Tom Grieve again, but you got Mike Hargrove, Lenny Randle, Jim Sundberg, Jackie Brown, David Clyde, Steve Fokoff. Grieve's numbers go down, so you want 73 Grieve, not 74. But Mike Hargrove just comes aboard in 1974, 477 plate appearances, dude at 323, 395. They were already calling in the human rain delay with the way he stepped out of the box between pitches. 819 OPS. Wow. What a great farm system in back-to-back years. 73 and 74 Rangers. And you got Lenny Randle. Lenny Randle's a 302 switch-hitting infielder, can play all infield spots, a couple outfield spots, 573 plate appearances. 302 hitting switch hitter. Hargrove and Randle need to get in the league. But then you got Jim Sundberg. Sundberg's got a -2 arm and is hitting 247. They don't have an urgent need at catcher. And of course, we'll know Sundberg will be a great defensive catcher through this entire decade. But man, those are 3 excellent rookies and you can't take all 3, period. So the good news for the Rangers is their keepers were old guys, right? So we have the years of 1971 and 1972 available. I think you take a pair from each years. Bernie Allen and Canigliaro, Frank Howard and Bob Johnson. You take all 4 of those guys from the years of 1971 and 1972 only. And in 73 and 74, you go for rookies. That's really the most efficient way to use the carryover league. And that's exactly what Texas is doing. This really might make Oakland's road a little more difficult. If, a team like Texas gets all their young guys playing, if Seattle takes Bill North, if the Angels get better with Nolan Ryan and company, because I don't want to see the Oakland A's just roll people and roll right back to the World Series again. It's too predictable, and it's fun to have some competition. Iron sharpens iron, all that stuff. All right, the Toronto Blue Jays, and this will wrap this analysis for all 32 teams. They have Tim Foley, took him an expansion. He's got a nice year in 74 where he brings his batting average up to something more respectable. He's currently a good defensive shortstop with no stick. At least in 74, I think he gets 260. That doesn't scream first-round material, though. All right, this is where the New York Mets send their players that they can't afford to keep on the roster anymore. They sent Tommy Agee over here a year ago, and they just sent Don Clendenon this past offseason, joining Darrell Chaney and Ron Klimkowski. Agee, he's really young here. He's only approaching 30 years old, but his production really goes downhill rather quickly. He still has a nice 1971 with a 790 OPS, and he's a 2 with a -3 arm in center field. That should be a pick the Blue Jays make. The other Met, Clendenon, he's got a 247, 713 OPS year in 71 as well. So both players in 71, and then they just fall off. They just don't continue into the 30s. Darrell Chaney's mostly a utility player, and he's only a keeper because they had to keep somebody. I mean, Toronto is just talent deficient. So it could very well be you don't have to sign all the guys you have designated as keepers. All keeping, the blue designation of keeper for 4 players means that nobody else can take that player away from you. But if you want, you could just give the player and somebody else, and then that player technically goes from the keeper list to the waiver list. Ron Klimkowski has 1 good year left as well, with 338 ERA. This is a team that could use a boost from the rookie class And I'm not expecting a lot though, because again, it's a fictional rookie class. They don't exist during this timeline. But they were given, or they got drafted, Mick Kelleher, Tom Ragland, Otto Velez, Jesse Jefferson, and Elias Sosa in 73. What's interesting there is we know Otto Velez and Jesse Jefferson eventually do get drafted to the Blue Jays later in the decade. Here they're too young and inexperienced. Elias Sosa's got a 3.28 ERA and a 1.27 WHIP, though. That's the best of the lot. And the 74 class, I'm hoping we can get a first-round pick here. I really do, because nothing's looking up for Toronto presently. And we did this alphabetically, of course, folks. So Toronto will be picking very early in the draft. Louis Gomez, Roy Howell, Joe Levitto, Mario Mendoza, Steve Swisher, Rorik Harrison, Ernie McAnally, Lowell Palmer, and Dan Spillner. Some of these guys are good later in the decade. Presently, none of these guys are hitting 250 or fielding very well. And the pitchers aren't pitching very well. Rorik Harrison has a nice year in a different year with Baltimore, I think in 72, but not now. And if I could make a trade with the Blue Jays, I would do it. And they might be on the clock when it's their turn to pick. And remember, we do have draft capital in the form of draft tokens. And it might be up to the Blue Jays to, well, Paul Splittorff's on the roster, and Kansas City wants him back. So you could send Splittorff back to the Kansas City Royals and get some talent. Let's see. Milton May is a talented player that the Pirates had, but the Pirates have Sanguian and don't need Milton May, hence why he's here in Toronto. Really, Splittorff is the one guy that has value on the current roster that they might just want to trade, particularly to a Kansas City team that disappointed last year. That could be a rather fun trade. Let's see if there's a let's see if these teams, theoretically, we could just kind of do this right now. Let's see if these teams could come up with some sort of trade package. So we talked about Toronto with Splittorff. And there he is. He's the number 2 starter, but he doesn't pitch on 3 days rest. And, of course, he's from the 71, the year of 71. And let's take a look at Kansas City. A little bonus coverage tonight. Possible trade in the works. Mike Heedlin, they went after Marty Patton, Roger Nelson, Jim Harden. They're going to put on waivers. Wally Bunker, they'll retire. They kept Horatio Pena, Rich Hinton, and Doug Bird. This team could really use a lefty in the starting rotation because Heedlin's very good. He's right-handed. Patton's right-handed. Roger Nelson's right-handed. Plus, Jim Harden's a right-handed starter. They're putting on waivers. Wally Bunker's right-handed. Pena. Really, Rich Hinton is the only lefty here. So, Roger Nelson has an excellent year in 72. Mike Heedland, I hate to say it, he might be the guy you send to Kansas City, send to Toronto. He's their ace. But we'll know that Paul Splittorff will be pitching for Kansas City during the time that they eventually start winning the West with George Brett arrives. Heedland's only got a year or 2 left. So that might be the compensation. Other options would be Pat Kelly from the year of 71. Not Freddie Patek, he sticks around, or Cookie Rojas. And here's another guy. Paul Shaw would be an excellent candidate to send away from Kansas City with a 71 card because he's a third baseman. And they want to bring up George Brett and stick him at third. So if I'm Kansas City, I would say Heedland and Paul Shaw to Toronto, and Toronto, you would send them Splittorff and a position player. Milt May. Yvonne Morel is a corner outfielder. Bill Voss is a corner outfielder. But the idea is that Blue Jays want somebody to draft in the first round. So let's see, again, the keepers that Kansas City has. We have Dwayne Josephson, Bob Oliver, Ron Swoboda. He's on waivers. Marty Patton, Horatio Pena. So I would get rid of one of these keepers. Josephson, Bob Oliver. I mean, it's not glamorous. Marty Patton probably has the most value as a keeper and a potential first-round pick, but Kansas City wants to hold on to him. But anyway, I'm going to call a wrap on that now because I don't want to make the transaction. You got to think about that more. But you can see how fun it is when teams get to the point where when it's time to draft and they don't have the obvious choice to make. And then the only choice is to seek help throughout the rest of the league. And when you're in a desperate situation like that, Toronto will not be successful in the trade, most likely. But they'll add talent in a different area of the roster. All right, so next week we'll do more hot stove trade talks like the one we just did. I think we're going to start with Frank Robinson, discuss his options as he is on the trade seat, and see who is going to heat up the hot stove league. Thanks for checking this stuff out, folks. We'll see you next time.